Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name's Claire and this is Yoli. I make videos all about houseplant care, sharing tips and tricks I've learned over the years to help keep your plants happy and healthy. And in today's video, I'm going to be taking you through everything you need to know to care for Philodendron Brandtianum, as well as some tips and tricks for faster and fuller growth. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it. So, since the intro that you've just watched, this is my fourth attempt to film the kind of main body of this video. The first time I started filming, it was just the worst time of day. The sun came out, I was blinded, the room heated up and it was too hot. And then I had a friend in a crisis, and then I had another friend in a crisis, and then my mum needed to use this room. So fingers crossed we can get through it this time. So, Philodendron Brandtianum. This is honestly one of my favourite plants. It's just so beautiful. It's got those beautiful silvery blue leaves that I just absolutely, you guys know how much I love them. I just absolutely adore them. They're so unusual. They're so pretty. And before I got this plant, I actually heard loads of people say that this one was kind of notoriously hard to look after. Loads of people had issues with it, that it was really slow growing as well. And I personally have not found any of that to be the case. I don't know if I've just kind of struck gold with the plant that I've got, but I feel like the environment that it's in is doing well for it. So I'm going to take you through some of the things that I've done to kind of keep mine happy. I was going to say I did get this plant about 6 months ago now in my House of Kojo order that I did an unboxing video for. I think it was 6 months ago. I'll put the date there, but I think it was around about 6 months ago. And as you can see, she hasn't grown height-wise that much in the time that I've had her, but that's just because I have chopped her back so much to kind of encourage her to be nice and full and bushy like she is now. I personally prefer that with this kind of plant as opposed to being really tall, but if you want to just let her grow, you can let her grow. It's just personal preference. But when it comes to light for this plant, although you can absolutely keep them in lower light conditions, they are quite well known for being able to survive in kind of medium to low light. They are gonna be a lot slower growing. They're probably gonna be a lot leggier and kind of more stretched out as well. And sorry about all the sirens, by the way. It's the Jubilee weekend and I don't know what's going on. So yeah, what I would recommend doing is keeping your plant in an area that receives lots of bright indirect light, which basically is just kind of like the room that I'm in right now. It doesn't have too much direct sun, but it's got lots of bright natural light. Direct sun can cause the leaves of your plant to scorch, so that is something to be really careful of. I know when I was first getting into houseplants, I just kind of thought, a really bright sunny spot, my plant's going to grow so well if I put it there, and it is definitely not the case. This one can be quite sensitive, so some kind of filter is a good idea if you have only got a really bright spot. My one as well actually is currently living in my grow cabinet, which although obviously does receive some natural light, it mainly just has grow lights, and this plant is doing really well in there. It seems really happy with that, and at the moment I do need to chop her back again because she's getting a little bit big. At the moment she does fit in there and I really like her in there. I'm going to keep her in there for the time being, or until maybe I decide to let her grow a little bit more. So yeah, grow lights are absolutely fine for this plant. They can do really well under them, but as I say, if not, bright and direct light is key. It's really also, it's so important with pretty much all of your plants, but to make sure that their leaves are kept clean, because if they're not, then they're not going to be able to absorb all the light they need. Even if you've got your plants in an area that receives really good light, if it's not able to absorb the light you're giving it because it's covered in dust and dirt, then it's pretty much the exact same thing as keeping your plant in lower light conditions, if that makes sense. So I'll always just wipe her leaves down. I've got a microfiber cloth or a damp sponge, something like that. Also misting your plant's leaves regularly. I know a lot of people feel very kind of weird about misting. I personally don't do it for humidity reasons. I just do it to kind of help keep the leaves clean, conditioned, free from pests, all that sort of stuff. So I personally do that for pretty much all of my plants, bar the velvety, furry ones. But I do it for this plant and she's really happy. The other thing I was going to say as well is, usually I would say about rotating your plants so that they can absorb equal amounts of light. If you want full and even growth, then that is definitely important. I personally, I only really see her from this side and I'm not that fussed, but as you can see, all of her leaves have turned to face the other way, and at the back there's just this kind of bare moss pole. So if you wanted her to kind of surround the moss pole and kind of be a lovely 360 plants, then turning her is definitely a good idea. Also, on the note of a moss pole, it is a really good idea. They are climbing plants. It's a really good idea to give them something to climb. I know some people do just let them trail, and they can look really pretty like that, but especially if you're trying to achieve kind of bigger, more mature growth, then giving them something to climb up is such a good idea. Again, I just keep the moss pole as damp as I possibly can. I'll mist it regularly. When I water her, I'll water the moss pole as well, and she's really, really happy. She's putting out, I don't know if you can see, but she's putting out so much new growth at the moment, obviously up here, and there's just loads of little sections within there, like there as well. She's just turning into a really lovely plant, and I adore her. She's great. But when it comes to watering for this plant, the best thing to do in my experience is to let the top few inches of soil completely dry out before you water them again, just because these plants, the only bad thing about these plants, and maybe this is why some people say they're difficult, is because they are so susceptible to overwatering, which basically just means they can get waterlogged really easily. They're really susceptible to things like root rot, and they can go downhill pretty quickly if you're not careful. Also, just to say as well, because I feel like I don't always make it clear in my videos, when I say overwatering, I don't mean giving your plant too much water in one session. I basically just mean watering your plant when it's not ready for a drink yet. So for example, if the soil feels quite moist and then you water your plant again, then you can overwater it. Whereas if you just give it loads and loads and loads in one watering sitting, I don't know what you call it. If you give it loads at one time, so long as you let it drain and then you don't give it any more again until it's actually ready for a drink, then it's very unlikely you're going to overwater it. It basically just means watering too frequently when your plant doesn't need it. I did just touch on drainage there, but that is something that is so important. Again, to avoid issues caused by overwatering, if you have got a pot like this one that doesn't have drainage, what I personally do is I'll keep all of my plants in their nursery pots, and then every time I water, I'll take them out, water them from the top, thoroughly let it drench through, let the water pour out the bottom, leave it somewhere so that it can drain for a while, and then put it back into its pretty pot. And if you don't do this, then obviously you risk water just collecting around the roots, which is not good. Also, we've got loads of mosquitoes in here. I don't know if you can see on camera. It's been really like thundery and weird, sunny, thundery, weird, like April weather today. It's not April, but it's just been very strange. And all of the mosquitoes have suddenly come inside. I keep hearing them like buzzing by my ear. So if you can see them, then that's because they're here. One thing that I always say as well is that I personally don't stick to any kind of schedule for my plants in terms of watering, because some of them like their soil to dry out slightly, some of them like it to be consistently moist. They've all kind of got different schedules, and it's really impossible to say, once a week this plant's going to need doing, because if it's in the middle of winter and your house is colder, then it's not going to need watering as often as when it's summer and it's lighter and brighter and warmer, if that makes sense. So as I say, the most important thing is to just monitor the soil. Some people do use a moisture meter. I personally just stick my fingers into the soil and feel. Like, I don't know if you can actually kind of tell, but at the moment there's still a little bit of moisture in there. Like when I lift my finger out, you can see it's not just like falling off, it's still kind of stuck to my finger a bit. So I would say this one's probably going to be ready for a water in a few days, but I'm not gonna risk doing it sooner. And if you are in any doubt, I would always say underwatering is better than overwatering, because underwatering is just so much easier to pull your plant back from. If it starts to kind of wilt a little bit and it kind of goes, okay, then you're like, cool, I'll give it some water and that'll fix it. Whereas if your plant is overwatered and the roots have started to rot, then you do risk losing your plant. So I would definitely not recommend doing that. The other thing to say along with watering is that during the spring and summer months, or when your plant is kind of actively growing, it's a really good idea to fertilize them, just so that you can help support all of the growth, encourage any new growth, and keep them happy. I can actually show you, it's right here. I personally am using liquid gold leaf fertilizer, which is just like the best stuff ever. It's honestly great. I think I'm right in saying they ship worldwide, but I'm not quite sure about that. You might have to look on their website, but it provides literally every single nutrient that your plant needs for healthy growth. And I use it on pretty much all of my house plants. And this one is loving it. I'm fertilizing her pretty much every single time I water at the moment. And she's really happy. She's putting out loads of new growth, and if she stops, then I'll stop fertilizing. But yeah, it's just a really good idea to do to make sure that they're getting all of the nutrients that they need in order to make sure they are growing happily and healthily. And I've said it before in my plant care videos as well, but in my experience, it's just a really good idea if you've never fertilized a plant before to kind of ease them into it quite gently. I only say this because some plants, if they've got really used to living in a soil that doesn't really provide much nutrients, they have kind of adapted to that. And if you suddenly introduce a load of fertilizer with nutrients they're not used to, they could be like, ah, and go into shock. And I've had it with a plant before, and I did end up killing that plant. So I would just say, if you've never fertilized, start with a little bit less than it says on the bottle, and then kind of assuming your plant is responding well, gradually build it up over time. But yeah, the other thing I was going to say, because as I said, I've got my plant in my grow cabinet at the moment, the thing that these plants really, really, really love is humidity. And this is why having a cabinet for your plants is so brilliant. If you don't have a cabinet, then you can kind of do the plastic bag method, which a lot of people use for acclimating plants, which is basically just creating kind of a blown up clear bag around them so that they have a nice humid environment. But the cabinet's the best thing in the world. I got mine for 20 quid off eBay, and it's just great. If your plant's not receiving enough humidity, with Brandtianums, the classic thing is to notice lots of brown tips on the leaves. And that is, I mean, it can be due to a watering imbalance, but in my experience, the most common cause is lack of humidity. And for these ones, I would say 60% is absolutely minimum. I've got my cabinet humidity is currently at 95, which might seem a little bit excessive, but if you're in any doubt, the higher the better for these ones. They're tropical plants and they just love higher humidity. Like, if you're able to crank it up. They're only going to thank you for it. It just helps to keep their leaves nice and conditioned. It means that when they've got new growth coming out, it's much less likely to kind of get tangled and break, because sometimes, especially in philodendrons actually, they start to snap. So I would say humidity is a very, very, very good idea. And then again, cabinet wise, but also you can just create this in your own home. I just kind of have a contained space for some of my rare tropical plants that I like to do this kind of intensely. But temperature is also really, really important. I would say between about 16 and 28 degrees Celsius is ideal for them. I try and keep my cabinet at about 24, 25 where I can, just because it really helps to speed up their growth. Like, I would say for lots of my tropical plants, but definitely for the Brandtianum, and maybe this is why I haven't found this one to be a very slow growing plant and for it to be quite quick for me. A high balance of nutrients, lots of natural light, but obviously not too much direct sun, fairly high temperatures and high humidity have just, I was gonna say worked wonders, but they really have done so well for this plant. And it gives me new growth all the time. Like, I propagated it. I'll put a clip in actually, my Propagate With Me video that I made only a couple of weeks ago. I chopped the top off it and already it's grown back. Like, you can see how quickly it grows. And that is just, in my experience, the best possible thing for them. So yeah, if you can keep the temperatures kind of at around mid-20s, that would, in my opinion, be the best possible thing for these plants. The other really important thing to say with these plants is that whenever you've got central heating on, or fires, or even air conditioning, to be honest, that can dry out the air so much. So even if you think the temperature's really good for the plants, you might actually be taking away a load of the humidity without meaning to. So for me, like for example, during the winter months, if I've got the heating on, I will always crank up the humidity way more than I think I actually need to, just to kind of counterbalance that, and that helps to keep my plants really happy. I did also mention at the start of this video that I've chopped and propagated this plant quite a lot, just to kind of help keep it nice and full and bushy, which is a really good idea if you don't want it to just kind of be one long straight vine going up your pole or trailing out of your pot. I'll pop a clip in of me doing it, but I personally love to propagate these plants in sphagnum moss, and it's definitely how I've had the highest success rates. When you're propagating them, it's a really good idea to leave them somewhere warm, somewhere fairly humid, and somewhere fairly light, and it should happen fairly quickly. It depends on the time of year slightly, but I only started mine off a few weeks ago and already I've got a little root. So I would say if you do it in the spring and summer months, you should hopefully have a lovely new plant in a few months or so. I feel like those are kind of the most important points and the things that have helped to keep mine really, really happy. But if anybody's got any questions, then please do drop me a comment down below. I'm hoping I didn't rush through that and miss anything, because I've had to film this video so many times. But if I did, I will absolutely put some clips in, put some more information in the tabs to one side so that you've got everything you need to know. But as I say, if you do have any questions, any comments, let me know below and I will get back to you. But if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video.